illustrator here in Portland, Maine, and I actually know Max because we went to school together. We went to the Maine College of Art, and we both studied illustration and graduated at the same time. And so I figured it would be a good place to start, like just to do an interview with someone that I'm really comfortable with. And, it'll probably be more of a conversational, and you could probably put it on in the background while you're drawing or do whatever you want to do with it. Use it more like a podcast, however. But I'm also going to be running clips in, of Max art so you can see what he does. And I will leave links to his website and Instagram and all that stuff in the description. So definitely check that out and check out his work further than what we show on this video. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about your intro as far as, the type of illustration you do? So Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I do primarily pen and ink based work. I've started to work digitally a little bit now as well. But most of my work focuses on kind of dark humor, the blend of, horror and campy kind of aesthetics, and blending those with really oddball, goofy humor, puns, and just kind of forcing the lowbrow aesthetic, but like with really highly rendered images, I guess. And I mean, I guess I've had to kind of adapt a little bit. I used to just want to do pen and ink, and now I've had to kind of switch over, and I'm starting to like it, I guess.
Yeah, I've noticed on your Instagram, it's been a ton more animation and more colored stuff. Actually, more animation than I'm. It's cool to see that, because I didn't get to see a ton of your animation in school. You were doing more illustration.
Yeah, actually. So, well, I mean, I like animation just like everybody else, but
Right.
I mostly do animation when I can't draw. I've been having like a lot of wrist problems from using nibs all the time and everything.
Oh.
So it's, whenever I can't use my right hand, I kind of switch over and just animate with my left hand and take the drawings I've already done. So yeah, pretty much all the animations I do are just taking pre-existing illustrations I've done, and then just trying to find some element that I can move around or redraw backgrounds, isolate characters, and then just sort of manipulate them from there. But yeah, so none of it's really too involved on the animation side. It's really just like a lot of isolating different parts of the drawing and then dragging them across the frame, or making something fly across, or so I think those are really fun to do, though. They're more like just relaxing and a better way to kind of like interact with the compositions I'm making. So I think a lot of the time when I'm making the animations, I end up really noticing a lot of flaws in my compositional work. And so I think it's helped, once I get to start moving things around, I'm like, oh man, that should have been over there the whole time,
Yeah.
as soon as I start to like fudge with all that. So
Well, that's the beauty of working digitally. Like, you can move things around as you're going, and then you're like, you can find out exactly how things work the best. If you have elements that are on different layers that you can move around.
Yeah.
And I think your animations are really cool. I know, like, you started off, like you were talking about, they were simplest, like you would move just one thing here. And so the animation, you could tell you could tell you're an illustrator, but now your animations, I feel like they've come quite a ways just in the last year, where they're getting more complex, and I can just see like you definitely moving in a great direction with your animation.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like that part of that is the digital transition that I've been making. It's kind of hard to take a very saturated black and white pen and ink piece and then isolate parts, because no matter how you cut it up, you're going to have these really awkward outlines, or even if you cut a character out perfectly, you're going to try to move them, and then the background isn't going to match the background you had drawn. You kind of have to like redraw that all over again.
Yeah.
So I feel like when I work digitally in certain aspects of the piece, it gives me more leeway to go in and redo the background digitally, and just kind of like extend that part a little bit more, and then not touch the pen and ink work, so it's not as choppy. It just gives me a lot more leeway with that, which is also, I guess, you were saying the benefit of working digitally is that you can move things around as much as you want, which is I've kind of started to latch onto that a little bit, because it is so nice to just, once you've made something that's a little bit off, you can just start messing with it, save your file, do 16 different versions of it, change the hue, and
that's the beauty of digital.
Yeah, exactly. It's great, but then I feel like there's always this part of me who really loves the, like, I guess the risk of working traditional, especially with like just ink.
Yeah.
Because the slightest mistake and your piece is just ruined.
But
That's kind of fun.
but working digitally, like when you can move things around, it's teaching you so much about composition that when you go back to working more traditionally, you're just going to be a better illustrator anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
And like you know this because you went to school with me, so you've seen like the process, how it's changed over the years, how my process has changed. And although my work maybe doesn't look digital, or some of it doesn't, some of it's not, a lot of it's not, a lot of, especially the newer stuff, but the older stuff, a lot of it was digital, and it didn't look digital because I would do like ink splatter on just ink splatter on a piece of paper, and then another piece of paper I would just do like a watercolor splash,
Yeah.
and do line work on another piece of paper, and then I'd scan them all in separately, put them on different layers, and then I would do what you're talking about, where I would just move things around until I found a composition I liked.
Yeah.
And so I have this look that's really loose with splatter and everything, and it was really crafted very specifically and meticulously, even though it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
And so that taught me a lot, so that I don't have to use that process anymore to get that same look. And so even though, like you said, it's more risky, obviously, when you're not working digitally, but it's the more you do the digital stuff and learn that, the less risky it becomes working traditionally because you've learned so much.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think that's one of the things that really got me into. Well, I guess not got me into working digitally, but like got me to open up to it a little bit because I was pretty resistant at first. And, I definitely saw a lot of people making cool work, but for some reason I always saw something a little too soft about the digital work that I was seeing being put out. And then when you started doing your more like traditional work, scanning it in, manipulating it and everything, it definitely had that traditional edge to it that I thought you couldn't really maintain. And so I guess that kind of like opened up my eyes a little bit, watching you use Procreate and, a couple other programs. And that definitely became something that I was like, maybe I can still maintain the traditional aspect of it. And I guess, you kind of have to stretch your bounds to make that work.
Yeah, but it's possible.
Yeah.
And now that you've done it and you know how it can be done, you can make digital work that doesn't look digital at all. It makes me personally, when I look at other people's work, wonder, is this digital? Like, it looks traditional, but is it digital? It could very well be.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, I think that's funny because I've also had people like if I get like a repost on Instagram or something, I love to see what they put as the the hashtags and the mediums because like sometimes it's just like all like photo manipulation and this and that and the other thing, and that's often with just like a pen and ink drawing, and I'm like, really? And then somebody will post something that's highly digital and then just has a little bit of like line art, pen and ink basically, and they'll be like traditional media and like all this stuff, and I'm like, all right, that's kind of funny. Like, no need to correct it really.
Yeah.
Like, unless it's really wrong or defeats the purpose of the piece or whatever. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of a good feeling, especially with the more digital work that I do, because I like when it's kind of mistaken for a painting or anything like that.
That's the goal of it. That's what you're trying to do, is get them to think that that it's not digital. And you can accomplish that. I always used to hate, like, when we were in school, like they would have like all sorts of different exhibits and shows that we could be a part of, group exhibits, and you have to make labels for your work, and you have to list the medium, and it's hard when the process we're talking about, where technically you've worked digitally, but you did so much of the process before you even got to the digital aspect, where you're doing the lines with pen and ink, and like I was talking about, where I'm splattering ink and charcoal and watercolor, and then scanning it, and then I'm only really doing that last 20% digital.
Yeah, just a little bit.
But like, they want you to put digital as the medium because, and I get it technically, that there's no original.
Yeah.
You have to print it because all the stuff's on separate pages. You can't sell an original to it. There's only a digital copy of that finished piece.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's where like the whole like blanket title of mixed media has always been confusing to me, because I'm like, well, isn't every piece kind of mixed medium?
All right, so I wanted to ask you more about the animation, because we touched on it before, but I wanted to ask you more about the programs you use, because I'm definitely interested in that. I've only done some GIFs or GIFs, or however you want to say it, and I use Photoshop for those, and that's pretty much the limit to my animation. So what programs are you using for your animation?
Well, I also actually started in Photoshop, just making really little, little animations,
Yep.
and I would just set up different keyframes, and usually I didn't even drag and drop that much. I'd either use the puppet tool to slightly warp something, so it was just ever so slightly manipulated, or I would just have a character blink, anything like that. So I would redraw the eyes a couple different times, and I'd just have 3 keyframes that would kind of open and close.
Yep.
Or just have drips come down from something, and that was really fun. It was a really fun way to start.
Well, before we even move on, then that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about like the eyes
Mm-hmm.
where they were blinking, because there's probably people that are watching that draw or do illustration that haven't done animation, but maybe they'd like to know how to do it, and they don't even know where to start, which is kind of where I was. And you actually were the one that showed me how to make those GIFs. So if someone they just wanted to just start with maybe like a simple animation, like taking one of their drawings and having it blink, really simple, just a few seconds.
Yeah.
How would they go about doing that, or what program would they use? Is there a good tutorial somewhere, or is it really easy, somewhat easy? You can just describe it.
So I didn't really go through. Not one tutorial. I guess I'm sure I looked up, how to use the motion bar and everything like that in Photoshop. But what I did really was just, I think the first thing I did was this like half skull head that didn't have a jawbone. I wanted to have black ink drips coming from the bottom. And I guess what I did was just draw a bunch of different little water droplets in ink, and then just kept plopping them down, and I would have them fall at different rates and stretch them out a little bit as they started to fall, and then have them elongate as they were going down. But really nothing too complicated at all. And so I would just set up the little timeline bar, get everything I needed in there, make a little background, and usually I make 2 or 3 different backgrounds with different transparencies, so that you can have the background kind of shift in and out a little bit. Because I think the more that you add a little bit of jitter to the background and to things that really don't require any finesse, the more alive the drawing becomes in general, and the animation becomes more believable automatically, or completely unbelievable and more fun for that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But yeah, I think like little tricks like that are what I started out on. Was just sometimes not even moving the character that was in it, and just moving the background a little bit. And for some reason that I guess just helps people think that everything's moving around a little bit better. So then as you just drag something down the screen, it's really not that hard to get people to buy it, I guess.
So basically, if you're just going to be like starting out, you're just trying to learn, and you just want to do something really simple, it's probably best to leave most everything in the image still, and just have one part that's moving, just to learn it.
Just to get everything moving on the right track, and then getting things to move in sequence is a lot more challenging as you go on, I
would imagine. And so if you're doing it that way, is it similar? Would you say it's similar to like almost like a flip book, but digitally? Or you're just drawing, you're maybe just moving something a little bit each time, each frame.
I mean, that's a good way to think about it, is especially if you're kind of more like traditionally minded, like I am, or like I was when I started doing the animations a couple years ago. It's a lot easier to think about it in terms that you are already comfortable with. So if you made a flip book when you were in 4th grade and you loved it, like just think back to what you did then. It's a pretty simple concept, but once you bring it into the computer, it seems really daunting, and I feel like that's definitely something I went through, where I would look up videos or, just try to like think about how to do it. And I'm like, oh my God, like how am I supposed to do this? Looking at like professional animation obviously isn't going to help you, because that's not what you're doing. You don't have a team of 70 people who are going to help you make this thing come alive. Or
no, animation takes a long time. Even just to do like a 30-second animation, I mean, it really takes a long time, especially if you're working alone.
Yeah, which is why I think, and this is the way I think you should approach like any piece, is just the more preparation you do before you actually bring everything in, and the more of a plan you have, the better it's going to be, and the
Right.
more prepared you're going to be for what isn't working. You're going to have a backup plan, anything like that. So even if you just draw it out, and if you do want to make something drip down the screen, just dot it out on a piece of paper, figure out your paths, everything like
Yep.
that, and then start to draw everything out so that you know that you're not just drawing something in vain, so that later you scan it and you're like, oh, I can't really make that move, can I? That's
doesn't
not
work,
really, it's
right.
going to work. It's like, well, that's not fun. That's why I think those things take a long time when you're doing a simple animation, is you have these ideas and then you just run with it and then you hit a wall at some point.
Yeah.
Or you just have to find a way around it, which is sometimes the way I have to do things if I really want to animate a drawing that I did a couple months ago.
That wasn't originally intended to be
Exactly.
animation. Yeah, you just have to figure out how to do it, which can be a challenge. And
Yeah.
so Photoshop, obviously, if you've used Photoshop, it's when you open it, it's usually in like essentials. That's
that's like the setting it always opens up to, or at least
so you have to change that to motion.
Yeah.
To work. Because I was always wondering when I heard people do animation in Photoshop, like, how does that work? There's no tools for
exactly.
animation. But if you switch the Photoshop from essentials to motion, then you have all the tools you need in it, and it gives you frames that you can work with.
Exactly.
And so it's like a frame by frame.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you showed me how to make that GIF, I thought that was like a lot easier than I thought it was going to be to make animation. And of course, that was a pretty simplistic way to do it. And it's just for a few seconds. But if you want to start, if you just look, you like to draw, you like to illustrate, but you'd like to start somewhere, it's a really good place to start.
Absolutely, yeah. And just like, again, with the whole flipbook thing or anything, just think about the most simple way to move something. If you've got a whole character and you want them to come out from something, just make 2 layers.
Right.
And then just slide the character in and out. Like, that's enough to get you
started,
get you going, like get the ball rolling. And also, people like small things like that. I like small things like that.
Yeah.
If you can just add a little bit of motion. I know a lot of photographers are they're getting a bit more of a 3D view of their work by just shifting it a little bit in Photoshop and going back and forth. I love those videos.
Yeah.
They're not like super high concept or anything.
No, they don't need to be. I remember when South
fun.
Park came out, like, people were like, this is the worst animation. I mean, the characters just their legs really don't move. They just kind of bounce. It's gotten better a little bit over the years.
Yeah, totally.
But people love South Park. It's like one of the most popular.
Well, and there's a charm to that kind of animation, where it's just kind of sputtering across the screen. It's, there's certainly room for higher art in the animation world, but not everybody has to be doing it. You can make whatever you want, I think.
That's true. And if you want to do it, the best place to start is South Park type animation, which is what we're talking about. Just really simple stuff. And, you have to have building blocks. You're not going to just be like, start with the really highest end animation without knowing how to do the basics.
Yeah.
So that's a good place to start. I want to dive into some art school stuff because we both went to the Maine College of Art. We have similar experiences. Obviously, we both started there at the same time. We both graduated at the same time. We had the same teachers. But the thing I want to talk about is, like, a lot of people that do art are wondering, like, should they go to art school? Is it worth it? Like, do you need to go to get a career in art? And there are definitely pros and cons. I want to know what you thought of art school. I know this is like a really big or broad question, but just if you had to say yes or no, there's no in between. Do you think it was worth going?
I think for me, yeah, I definitely think so. The part that I was lacking before going to art school was exactly what I got out of it. Which was compositional and design techniques and being able to kind of branch out a little bit more.
That's how I feel too.
Yeah.
Just so you know, like, I totally agree with you. Of course, like, it depends on what you're doing too. Like, the art school, especially, well, not especially, but the Maine College of Art, we happen to know more about that art school than any other school because that's where we went. But they have, photography major, music, illustration, and so, of course, we know more about the illustration major than any. And I know that when an art director is hiring someone to do an illustration, they need someone for an editorial illustration or for a children's book or whatever. Mm-hmm. They're just going to look at your website. They're going to look at your art. They don't care where you went to art school. They don't even care if you went to art school.
Yeah.
So it's not important in that sense. Like, you don't need to go to art school to have a career. But like you're saying, if if you need to learn more about composition or get more confident with your drawing skills, art school can be a huge benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think it's just it's a good place to branch out, I guess. And I don't mean that like obviously you should take different classes and everything, and they always tell you to do that. That's great, but mostly you're being set up with a bunch of professors that know things that you don't know. And I feel like most people go in expecting to just get that information and leave. But that's not really the case because, if you've got, like, I don't know how many professors Mecca has, but, like, there were roughly, like, 10 in the illustration department. And, I mean, none of them did horror art like I like to do or anything like that. But that was okay, and it took me a little while to realize that those people still can point you in the right direction. And then maybe they don't have the answers, but, like, it's a good jumping off point, or it's a good point to be able to go to them and say, hey, do you know anybody? And go a step beyond. But I feel like that's the biggest misconception with art school is that, or any school, I guess, is that you're going there, you're going to get all the information you need, and then you're going to leave. As opposed to, because that's kind of the way it's presented, in a way, and you can't really blame them for that. They're trying to get you to go to their school. But it's a lot better to take internships and do this and that to get the information you need and really branch out.
Yeah.
Because pretty much any space has the ability to give you that. If you just ask people for references, or you ask, you ask any professor, like somebody to go to for concepts, somebody email, because if they don't have the answer, maybe you can email a professional artist that does things similar to you that you wouldn't have suspected.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's mainly what I got out of it, was the ability to go and do things like that. But that's also something I saw out of other people going there, that, people would complain about not learning enough or anything like that, or not being, like, handed the tools to do, the things that they were expected to go out in the world and do.
Right.
But it's like, that doesn't exist anywhere, really. You don't just get given things. You have to go and, like, kind of hunt for what you want to do.
It's true.
Yeah.
And, like, I know a lot of the illustrator faculty, like, they have all been doing illustration for a long time, and some of the ideas they have for how to get jobs maybe aren't current. I mean, they like we were told to send out postcards and things like that, and there's probably tons of people that are still getting work that way. I don't know too many, but that hasn't worked for me. All the things that have worked for me are stuff that I learned on my own. But the principles still worked. Like, you can take these principles they have of how to get work and figure out what the principle is inside of what they told you, and how you can apply it to, like, the world that we live in today.
Absolutely.
As far as like the internet goes, because almost all the work that I've gotten is through the internet since I've left school. I will say, like, going to school, one of the best things was the connections I made.
Yeah.
Most of the first jobs that I did, I got because of a connection through the school. I did some illustration for magazines, and it was connected through the school. So even if I didn't learn anything new as far as compositionally or tactily, just the connections alone was worth going, because those jobs were stepping stones to bigger jobs, right?
Yeah. Also, just, I think this part's a little bit, I guess it simplifies the art school experience, but having 4 years, if you go to a 4-year school, to just hone a skill is huge. You can't do that while you're working a full-time job.
Right.
I definitely tried to do that, or I couldn't do that while working a full-time job.
Most people can't.
Yeah, just because I didn't have the space or time to do it. You're going to a job and you're trying to put up with, people yelling at you or, whatever. And then you try to go home and do your work after that. That's still only, like, I think I could only get, like, 8 hours more a day out of it. And then that's working 16 hours a day, technically. Yeah. And I feel like you just don't have the headspace to really improve as much as you can if you go to an art school. So I guess, that's, like, oversimplifying it. And it's kind of like, I don't mean to have it sound like I'm saying pay, $100,000 to
to take 4 years.
To get 4 years to
Right.
to do that. There's a lot.
Because you could just technically just take 4 years and not pay an art school, but that's the
And I think there are a lot of things I got out of going to art school that you just wouldn't get by sitting there. I mean, just the feeling of community there is a huge part of its success, I think.
I think so too, and we mentioned this before, but I think one of the biggest things you can get out of going to art school is the critiques. You've got 4 years where people are actually giving you honest critique of your work.
Mm-hmm.
When you're not in school and you're showing your family or your friends your work, they're not giving you honest critique. They're going to tell you it's awesome, no matter how bad it is, right?
Yeah.
But at art school, that's not the case. You're getting real critique, and if you're willing to actually take the critique to heart and learn from it, you can really improve quite a bit if you're taking it in and using it.
Absolutely, yeah. I know. I think the most frustrating thing for me going through art school was every time I would go into a crit and not get what I wanted out of it. And by that I don't mean like hear what I wanted to hear. That's not the point.
No, I know
mean,
what
like you where you'd show up and somebody just be like, "That's funny." Like, anything else? And we're just like, "No, it's good." You'd be like, "All right, well, that doesn't help at all."
Yeah, like I need constructive.
Extremely frustrating.
Right. You need to give me some type of feedback that helps as I move forward.
Yeah.
I remember there was like one person in critique that I remember, and I'm not going to name names, but everything you said to this person, like no matter what it was, like I think that the contrast is not really right over here. I know you want the person's face to really be like the focus of this illustration, and it's not working because the contrast is off, or whatever you said.
Mm-hmm.
This person would always say that they meant to do that.
Yeah.
Because they just couldn't take critique.
Yeah.
And so, I meant to do it like that. And so don't be like that person. If you're willing to actually say, okay, no, I didn't mean to do that, you have a good point, and go back and figure out how you can fix it. And the cool thing is, there's usually tons of ways to fix a problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're trying to make something the central piece or the central part of the illustration, you can make the color brighter, you can make it the contrast different. I mean, you can make it bigger. There's so many ways to fix every problem. Like just having people tell you the problematic parts of your piece they're not telling you what to do. They're giving you like an idea of what needs to be fixed, and then you're getting to still go back and use your own knowledge and your own skills to fix that problem.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, and you get to choose whether you're going to take that advice or not. Which,
well, that's another thing, too, yeah. You don't have to take anybody's critique, and some people didn't, and usually those people don't progress as well.
Yeah.
Because they're not taking any critique. But you're right, sometimes you go into critique, and they're not, the people give bad critique. It's not right.
Yeah. Well, and as much as you shouldn't be resistant to critique and you shouldn't be like insulted by it, I feel like people also say, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was kind of crap, because it's like, well, do take it personally. Like, I would take it personally.
Take it to heart, yeah.
Yeah, like, definitely take it personally. You made this. I hopefully spent a really long time on it. Otherwise, where are you going to art school? But, once you've put that much into it and you get a rough critique, like, yeah, take it personally. But, I mean, don't, like,
don't dwell on
beat
it.
yourself up about it, but like take it personally. Go back and like do what you have to do.
Yeah.
But that was one part. I know that you don't have all the time in the world when you're going to art school, but I always love to, even after final crits, like go back and keep working on pieces until I liked them. Yeah. Unless it was a concept where I was like, what, I don't think this is worth saving.
Yeah, it's not.
I'm not a fan of this piece.
Yeah, I get that.
I'm just going to cut my losses and use what I learned and not do it again, But that being said, I always thought there should be follow-up critiques, like at the end of a semester or at the end of a year, being able to like bring everything together and be like, okay, like here's what everybody fixed about all the projects, because I felt like a lot of people would just leave them in the dust,
Yeah, I'm sure there are some art schools out there that must do that, have like some type of an end of year critique of all the work, and because a lot of people probably do go back into the work and fix some of the issues. Hopefully, because we used to have a lot of in-progress critiques, because we're doing sketches and refining sketches, and so hopefully by the time you get to the finished piece, it's all the kinks have been worked out. But sometimes
or at least
that's
nothing
not the case.
giant. Maybe you took one wrong turn towards the end, and you just need to fix that next time.
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a huge part of it, is just not giving up on a piece and just keep going.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than an unfinished piece. It's It's like,
no, I know it.
especially if you've already
It's
spent...
unusable.
Yeah, especially if you already spent like 20 hours on it. Why would you not spend an extra 4 hours just to do it right? You know?
Yeah, if
Get
you
an
think
actual portfolio
it's
piece.
fixable and you're going to have a portfolio piece out of it, it's worth doing for sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything about art school that we didn't talk about that you'd like to mention, or is there anything that maybe you thought you'd get out of art school that you didn't, or things that you weren't expecting that you did get out of art school?
I guess one thing that it took me a little while to realize was that a lot of people feel like they're being forced into a box when they go to art school because you know, you've got your style and you want to do that and that only. And I definitely felt like that was the case for me, you know, wanting to do more kind of gory, funny art. You know, sometimes you would get assignments and they have to give assignments to the whole class. You can't just tether each assignment to each person.
Right.
But that being said, I feel like I was very resistant to that at first, and I felt like I was being forced into a box and that I didn't have that much control over it and everything like that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you are the one paying for your education.
Yeah.
And, like, to a certain extent, you should follow the curriculum because, like, it is set out for a reason.
Yes.
But if you feel like you have a justified qualm with the way that the class is structured and you really don't think that you're getting out of, like, getting what you thought you would out of that class,
right.
Say something, you know, but say it in a way where you don't sound like a petulant child that's like, I don't want to do this assignment. You know, just actually go and say, like, hey, I was wondering if I could kind of twist this assignment a little bit because this isn't the sort of commission I would ever get, you know?
That's actually a good idea. And, like, what you're saying is definitely more specific to illustration and graphic design majors, because painting and sculpting majors, and they usually can work on what they want, especially, like, I know at Maine College of Art they could, but with illustrators and graphic designers, we would get very specific assignments because they're assuming you're going to go out and work and you're going to have different clients and you're going to be doing work that you don't have control over.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and that sometimes isn't your favorite piece to work on, but you need to kind of twist
learn how
it and
to
make
do
it yours. Yeah, and I feel like I could have been a lot more malleable to that process, you know, in my first 2 years. And after that, I sort of started to understand a little bit more, you know, where things were going. And I kind of wish I hadn't wasted those first 2 years by being a little bit more difficult about it. But also, I guess it's a learning experience. You have to start to trust that your professors know what they're doing, and also that you need to trust yourself a little bit, that you can stand up for yourself. Like, I mean, you're going to art school. You're probably an adult unless you're like the Doogie Howser of art. So just speak up, you know?
Well, that's it. You just got to learn how to speak up for yourself. Yeah. And I know you did sometimes. Definitely when your style, well, it's not even necessarily the style. It's more the subject matter. Your drawings are mostly, you know, horror or comedy, but mostly horror. And when they are comedy, they're still horror, but like mixed together. And so we get a lot of assignments that it's hard to mix some type of a spider web and whatever into it, and so it's like you really had to do a lot of assignments that you didn't probably love doing, and so it makes sense why you were resistant, but just giving yourself over to it and just learning how to deal with it is, if you could do it again, you probably would have
absolutely
done that earlier instead of waiting till the last year or two before you really just, all right, I'm going to do it, I'm going to jump fully into this and just do what I have to.
Well, or just saying that, you know, you don't have to get everything out. It doesn't have to be a portfolio piece or anything like that. You know, it can be a piece you never show anybody, but if it can't be your subject matter, at least make it a compositional learning experience.
But that's tough because when you're in art school, you don't have a portfolio yet.
Yeah.
You hardly have any pieces that you're really happy with. And so you really want every project that you work on to at least have the possibility of having it be a portfolio piece when you're through with it.
Yeah.
Because you want to get out of graduate from art school and have at least some type of a portfolio to show to people.
Yeah.
Otherwise you've spent 4 years like honing a skill and you've got nothing to show for it. I mean, you do have stuff to show for, but you know what I mean? It's like you want it. And so when you're getting all sorts of assignments that you know you're not going to be able to have a portfolio piece from, it can be a challenge and it can be frustrating. You're paying a lot of money to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and also, you know, if you have like any sort of real outlook on life, you know that when you leave there, you're not you're not gonna be a full-time artist anymore. You're gonna go get a job, and I can speak from experience. Working 8 hours a day after art school, it's really difficult because you come home and you try to do 8 hours of illustration.
Yeah.
Suddenly, all of your life starts to slip, and you're like, oh God, I gotta take care of my apartment or do this or that, and you kind of have to sacrifice some part of your life to still make that happen.
Well, that's actually a good segue because that's kind of what I want to talk about next.